Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today I am going to be doing my October wrap up. Now for the month of October, I have to say, I started out so strongly. I was like zooming through books left and right. I was so proud of myself, and then about halfway, 3/4 of the way through the month, I just stopped reading altogether. I got in a really bad reading slump and just did not have the motivation. But regardless, I did finish 5 books to talk about, and I started and I'm partway through a 6th one. So not too bad, and I've definitely re-picked up my reading game in November. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into the books. First book I'm going to talk about, I'm just going to briefly touch on, and that is The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. I finished this in the month of October. It was my commute book through most of the September months, and I only had a little bit left going into this month. That being said, I absolutely loved it. I was floored by this whole story from beginning to end. It's just absolutely so much fun. It is a swashbuckling tale of like these group of thieves, and they're kind of like pulling off these giant heists, but they find themselves in a heist they didn't necessarily anticipate, and you're trying to see how they can get out of it, and will they come out of it ahead, etc. It's just so entertaining and so well plotted and written. I just loved every second of it, and the characters were unbelievably lovable. I personally cannot wait to pick up the second book, and I'm really excited to see how this world continues to evolve and the story continues to expand, because Scott Lynch is good. He definitely tricked me once or twice within the story, so pumped to have read this, and I did give this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I'm going to talk about is Serpent and Dove. This was a book I was highly anticipating in that it had so much buzz upon its release that I was really curious and wanted to pick it up for myself. This was a book I really wanted to be highly entertaining, honestly a little bit cheesy in the best ways, and just full of really good angsty romance, and I would say this book definitely delivered in that capacity. This is a fantasy world that's basically centered upon witches and witch hunters and not living in harmony. Witches are seen as pariahs within society, and they are hunted mercilessly by witch hunters, which are part of this like kind of religious sect that view them as heathens on earth, if you will. At the beginning of the story, our main character, who is a witch, somehow finds herself in a situation where she has to marry a witch hunter. They absolutely despise each other. They do not trust each other, obviously, but it obviously creates a hotbed scenario of a hate-to-love relationship we're all here for, okay? Like, that is why I picked up this book, because I wanted that trope played out, and I was hoping it'd be well done, and I have to say, it definitely played it up so well. It created scenarios of hilarious banter, complicated romantic scenarios. I mean, like, it really did create a really fun and entertaining romantic setting, and it was why I wanted to read this book, and I would say it delivered really well in that capacity. Obviously, this book is not without its flaws. While I feel like it thrived in its romantic setting, it definitely didn't explore the fantastical elements of the story, kind of giving more background and understanding to the witch lore itself, and also just kind of explaining how the magic works, or even how the government works in this world. But at the same time, I did not really care. Like, I wasn't really looking for that anyway, but I did want to call that out to say, like, this is not a complete fantasy story, but it is a really entertaining romance-centered fantasy story. So if that's what you're looking for, definitely check this book out and keep that in mind when you're picking this book up. I'm excited for the rest of the books in this series. It would be interesting to see if the fantasy world is expanded more, but regardless, I really liked this book. I read it in like 2 days, and I would give this like a 3.75 out of 5 stars. It was super, super, super entertaining. The next book I completed this month was Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I did read the illustrated version of this, but honestly, it is so heavy, I did not want to hold it up for this video. This is obviously a reread for me, and part of my Harry Potter reread that I'm attempting to do this year. That being said, I really enjoyed the reread of this book. Particularly the illustrated edition was absolutely beautiful, full of sweeping, full-colored illustrations, and honestly just provides like a new reading experience for the series overall. Funnily enough, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire is the book I've read the least but seen the movie the most. It also might be kind of closer to the bottom in terms of my favorites of the series. Regardless though, I love all Harry Potter books, so I immensely enjoyed my reread experience of this. And because I honestly don't read this one very often, I noticed and picked up on a lot of new things that I honestly forgot about that obviously aren't shown in the movie, so that was also really fun as well. That being said, I'm mildly devastated that I have to wait 2 years for the 5th book to be illustrated, but definitely counting down the days for that to come out. And in the meantime, definitely plan to continue to have my Harry Potter reread, and I'll be picking up the 5th one soon. But yeah, they're starting to get long and chunky now, but oh, Harry Potter. I mean, what can I say? It's Harry Potter. The next book I completed this month was The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, constantly calling this book The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hugo. This is a thriller novel I really wanted to pick up in the month of October because of Halloween and all of that jazz, and I have to say I was floored by this book. I loved every second of it. I could not put it down, and it had such an interesting whodunit style premise. We basically follow a main character who wakes up in this manor home. Essentially, he relives the same day over and over again, but waking up in a new host. Each host has their own problems and also their own set of skills and unique perspectives that help inform him on decisions and ultimately, hopefully, help him piece together who was the killer of Evelyn Hardcastle. Because if he cannot figure out who killed Evelyn Hardcastle by his last host, his memory's erased and he has to go through the entire process over again. This is a book full of twists and turns and honestly kept me guessing like amazingly well. Like, I wouldn't say I'm like the perfect sleuth by any means, but nothing is more disappointing than reading a thriller, getting to the end and being underwhelmed by the reveal. I can say this book had me like gasping throughout the entire thing. It was just so good and clever. Not to mention, I just feel like it provides kind of an old school thriller setting, which I love. Like, it kind of has like a Downton Abbey flair, but significantly more sinister, which I think is to its benefit. Honestly, this is just a book that is perfect to pick up on like a dark and stormy night. Read it through one sitting. A lot of people did say it was confusing. I would disagree. I didn't really find it confusing. I can definitely see how it can get complicated because our main character is reliving the same day in different hosts, but those hosts are all existing in the same day as well, so he'll run into his past self, his possible future self, and you kind of have to piece everything together, and it just creates such a unique experience. So loved this so much. I gave it a 4.5 stars. This book I completed was Fireborn. This is a new YA fantasy release, and I was really excited to pick it up this month to check it out. I heard strong early buzz, and I have to say overall I was not disappointed. This is a heavily political dragon fantasy story, and while I say heavily political, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a lot of court maneuverings, but more so that the politics and like the government structure is heavily influencing like the state of this world and kind of the theme of this world, if you will. This is essentially set in a kingdom which recently had a revolution. The lower classes rose up, overthrew this very domineering aristocratic system, and now a new structure has been set up centered around equality. Basically, everyone takes a test when they're a child and they're sorted into different groups based on their propensity in those tests. One of the things that also came from the revolution is that a strict military and powerful military class called the Fireborn are now open for auditions from anyone from any caste. Meaning now anyone can audition to have a dragon pick them to be part of this really strong military division. This Fireborn scenario is kind of the center and the heart of the story. Our two main characters, this is a dual perspective story, grew up together and are best friends. They met in an orphanage and have been kind of inseparable ever since. And while they may be similar in a lot of ways, there are a few key differences that make them very different. One is an aristocrat in hiding. He kind of survived the purge and was actually the son of a really powerful lord from an old regime. And the other is the daughter of a farmer whose whole family was murdered by a fire lord. With that context in mind, throughout the series, besides it being super politically interesting, lots of action with this dragon scenario, and there's like an incoming war, but more so I feel like this book deals with so many interesting emotional stakes. Everyone in this story is impacted by this revolution in some way. Everyone has lost something, and I feel like the author constantly lets characters go through their own emotions and also show empathy to other characters, which I just think is really great. I feel like in a lot of YA people have to like hide their emotions or hold in their emotions and just do the task. And that way it's so refreshing to see so many characters have to like confront their emotions, go through the mourning or the impact of past harm to themselves, and kind of also work through a lot of that emotion together. And it's just was lovely in that way, and also terribly sad in a lot of other ways. That being said, I found this book to be super entertaining. I particularly liked the two main characters. I felt they were very, very real, and I quickly fell behind their two POVs. Ultimately, I thought this was a really strong debut and first book in a series, and I'm excited to see where the story goes from here. This is definitely a story of like rock in a hard place. It will pull at your heartstrings, definitely. Overall, I would give this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was strong. It could benefit from more world building, but overall, I really was sold by the characters. So Yes. And the last book I'm just gonna quickly touch on because I'm honestly not that far, and that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is my current commute book, and I'm about 162 pages of the way through this book. I have a lot left, but so far I'm really liking it. It's really, really dry. I knew it was kind of a period story set in like London, but I did not anticipate how like Downton Abbey-esque a lot of the social situations are. I mean, it's lots of dinner parties and jabbering at people and insulting people through veiled niceties. It's really interesting though, and there is magic every once in a while. I sound like I'm bashing it, but I'm actually really liking it. It just takes a second to kind of get oriented in both the language and the world itself. That being said, I'll definitely continue to read this throughout the month of November. It's my goal to finish it before the end of the year. So between all of my train rides to and from the city, I should be able to accomplish that, but did want to quickly call this one out too. Alrighty guys, those are all of the books I completed in the month of October. Let me know down below some books you've read recently, as I would love to know, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye!